Time to talk GA. Eamonn Fitzmaurice, good morning to you.
Morning, lads.
Thanks, Millie, for taking the call. Munster final to begin with, obviously Cork, Kerry tomorrow night. Before we get into the nuts and bolts of that, Eamonn, we were just discussing a bit earlier the fact that some of the main contenders or pretenders to Dublin's crown have seemed to maybe fallen back a bit. Now, I know some of this depends obviously on what happens at Páirc Uí Chaoimh tomorrow night, but are Kerry suddenly the main contenders to that to threaten Dublin a bit later in the year?
I wouldn't look at it that way. I think at the moment, like you said, the obvious pretenders that might have been there at the start of the championship haven't had the start they would have liked, particularly when you think about the likes of Tyrone and Mayo. But I'd hold off in judgment until the Super 8s and until the latter half of the Super 8s. I think a lot of the bigger teams would have, aimed at that time of the year, even conditioning-wise and everything else. So I'd hold judgment for the moment. I wouldn't be writing anyone off just of yet, but certainly to catch up to Dublin, I think all teams have a bit of a gap to close at the moment.
Is that something that intercounty teams are doing quite often at the moment, Eamonn, particularly in Kerry and Dublin's case, is kind of tapering their, or planning their strength and conditioning a little bit towards July, towards the fact that they, on the premise that they should be in the Super 8s?
I think so, Owen. Yeah, the way I think this tapering thing that people always talk about, I don't think the sports science side of things, they look at it like that anymore. They look at it more that you're on a constant upward curve, and that's certainly the way we would have been trying to do it for the last couple of years, that you're on a curve and you're trying to get towards the top of that curve in the latter stages of the championship. But I think a lot of the bigger teams would have learned a lot from last year's experience of the Super 8s, that there's a lot goes into those 3 games in the 4 weeks if you can get there, and having a fully fit and fresh squad at that time of the year is where you want to be, regardless of your route of getting there, whether it's through the direct route after winning the provincial championship or after coming through the qualifiers. Once you get to that point, that you have a fully fit, fresh squad, and that you're in a good place physically as well. So, as I said, I didn't kind of read too much into the league or what was going on in the league or even the early rounds of the championship. I think it's from now on that we'll get a true picture of where teams are at.
And how hard is it, like, just in terms of that upward curve? It strikes me as, like, if you look at Mayo, obviously, as an example, and we're into the sort of somewhat unthinkable situation this weekend that Mayo, as unlikely as it seems, that they'll lose to Dunne this weekend, obviously could be out of the championship. But how difficult is it to maintain the narrative of that upward curve, when things aren't necessarily going your way? I mean, particularly in that Mayo context this year and indeed maybe over the last few years.
Yeah, I think there's a good bit of trust involved in that situation, that I think all teams, and certainly the top teams, would have the strength and conditioning experts and have the sports science people behind the team that would have the knowledge and the plan to have you on that upward curve. And I think there's just trust there. Sometimes the results don't quite go your way, but you have to trust that you're on the right path and keep going. And I think if there is a collective trust there, if there's a trust between the players and the management, and in particular in that scenario, I think the players have to trust the management team, that they know what they're doing, and that there is a big picture there and there is an overall plan there. And once everyone's buying into that and going in the same direction, it's fine. A result goes against you, then question marks can be raised. But as I said, once that trust is there, I think you get to where you want to get more often than not then.
Yeah, you wouldn't have had a huge amount of experience of this specific thing in terms of the Mayo aspect of it, but like the cumulative scars of, I suppose, the journey that they've been on over the last while, including this year. Like, I'm assuming that those questions that you talk about being raised, and I know that it's a new old management team obviously back in again this season, but the cumulative scars or something like that for Mayo, does that ultimately end up catching up with them, or does that sort of prove that there's a bank of experience there that says, listen, when the session kicks in on the Monday night after there was common defeat, for example, and it's 4 weeks ago now, so how relevant it is I don't know, but that group just get back together again and they go, right, look, it's not a cumulative scar situation as much as actually we've been here before and we know what to do.
I think so, yeah. I'd lean more towards the latter, and I think with Mayo, sometimes I felt after the league final this year, even James Horan, straight after the game, I was surprised. He said something along the lines of, we should have won by more, or we shouldn't have been in a situation where David Clifford had that chance at the end that we should have won by, I think he might have said even we should have won by 10 points or something like that. And that surprised me because, you know, at the end of the day, the league is the league and you want to win the league, but it's all about championship. And I think Mayo may have been in a situation that they thought they were further down the line than they were, that they were overconfident almost coming into the Connacht Championship, and the fact that they had that bit of a setback now, I think they're actually more dangerous now than they would have been if they had come through winning the Connacht Championship. If that makes sense now, the game at the weekend against Down, away to Down, and especially with probably the find of the league for them, Matthew Ruan seemingly having a long-term injury, it's a tricky fixture for them, but if they get up and running, I think they'll still be dangerous, and I think they'll still be part of the conversation at the end.
Is that something that can happen, Eamon, when you've had a magnificent spring that, I don't want to say things you get ahead of yourselves a little bit, but sometimes there's kind of like a false identity of where you're actually at. Like, obviously 2017 was a big spring for your Kerry team. Did that ever have an impact like it might have been having on this Mayo team that summer?
I think in 2017, the big thing that we took out of 2017 was we won the league final, but we hadn't actually had a great league. We had been inconsistent enough. We got to the league final and we played very well in the league final. And I suppose the big thing for us was actually beating Dublin in Croke Park. More so than the league final was a satisfying thing looking forward to the championship. I don't think it really impacted us in the championship that year because we had a good Munster championship again. It was in the All-Ireland semi-final replay that we underperformed that season. So I don't think it had that much of a negative impact on us. I think when we had a lot of younger players coming through, it was a positive thing. But I think this year, just looking from the outside in, I think that it might have put Mayo minds in a place that they thought they were a bit further down the road, whereas they learned in the Connacht Championship that they weren't quite where they needed to be. And I'm sure the beauty of the game that they lost was that they had a bit of time to gather themselves and get organised for the qualifiers and the run at the qualifiers. So I think you'd be expecting a pretty big reaction from them this weekend.
Kerry obviously going for Munster title number 7, I think in a row. Is it 8 of the last 9? I was saying it a bit earlier in the show. And like, it's the Munster Football Championship is not held in the same disdain as the Leinster Championship, for whatever reason. But I mean, and before you give me the obvious answer, I'll remind you of 3-18 to 2-4 last year. Is there a danger that if this goes the way it's expected this weekend and there's no end to it inside, a danger that we're ultimately end up having a lot of the same conversations about the Munster Championship?
There is probably that danger, but I think the thing about it is that it changes quite quickly. I think, in 2016, there was 3 of the 3 Munster teams in Kerry, Clare and Tipperary in the All-Ireland quarter-finals that season, and Kerry and Tipperary ended up getting into the semi-finals that season. So, not that long ago, the Munster Championship was being seen as being a very competitive province. I think the fact that in particular last year in 2017 we beat Cork and Killarney, but I'm not sure what we won by in the end, maybe 6 or 7 points, but it was a much more competitive game and it was a tight game and they had goal chances that day, and they made it quite busy for us, but we managed to get through the game. Last year definitely we played well in patches and we put up a big score in them. But I'm not sure. I don't think anyone really knows what to expect from Cork tomorrow night. That there has been positive signs there from them from the latter half of springtime on, and we'd all be hoping for certainly a more competitive game than was there last year. But I think at the end of the day, from the Kerry perspective, it's a chance to win a Munster Championship and it's a chance to get straight into the Super 8, so that's what they'll be focusing on.
A few changes obviously named overnight. I'm sure you've seen the team this morning. Adrians, I don't know, you can give us your own thoughts. It seems like that might be one of the biggest calls outside of any injury enforced. Adrians out and Jack Barry in.
Yeah, I think Adrian is unlucky because he plays very well in the Munster semi-final against Clare, and he was unlucky with us a couple of times as well last year, where he was very close to the team and very close to the squad, but it just didn't quite happen for him. But I think the David Moore and Jack Barry partnership is the first choice midfield for Kerry and for Peter Keane. So because of that, Adrian has ended up losing out, but he's a great replacement to have ready there, and if anything should happen in the middle of the field or in the half-forward line for that matter, he's a good guy to have ready there to bring in.
James Dunne, who's obviously missing the game, Eamonn, with another injury, hamstring this time. What is he like when this happens? Is he somebody who remains upbeat? Because from the outside looking in, it's surely going to be hard to try and keep yourself positive after just the most unbelievably unlucky run of injuries.
Yeah, it's very tough on him, and that night in Ennis against Clare, he really looked in very good physical shape. He looked back to himself. He played well. I was thinking myself that he gets this game under his belt. It's a huge positive for him. And he's a good lead into the Munster final to get the body right again, but unfortunately, and it was that kind of night, a wet, dirty, cold night, that you could do damage to a hamstring or a soft tissue injury, and unfortunately for James it happened, and like you said, it's the cumulative effect that he's getting these setbacks. He works very hard in the gym and his rehab and on his conditioning. He's in great shape, but for whatever reason he's getting these injuries, and unfortunately for himself and unfortunately for Kerry, he hasn't been able to get that consistent run of games, and sometimes that he's had a couple of games together, but he hasn't been able to train much in between because of knocks. So it's disappointing for all concerned. But look, James being James, he's been there before. He'll fight back. He's no other choice, and hopefully, that once he gets through it, that he'll be okay for the Super 8s once Kerry get there, and he could be, the way to look at it is he's gone into that then fresh, and if he gets a run of games under his belt, he could be very dangerous.
Has there ever been the temptation to wrap James O'Donoghue in cotton wool and give him perhaps a prolonged break from intercounty football? Because obviously he's well used by the club as well when he goes there during the winter, that it just seems from that everything's been tried with James O'Donoghue at this point and it's still not working. It's very, very hard to get your head around.
It is, and I think we tried that, and there was seasons where he didn't play any league football, and then I think he always felt himself that the best years he had, 2013, 2014, particularly 2014, he had a very strong league that year, and it set him up for a strong championship. So he always felt himself that getting a good league under his belt got his body ready and got him mentally ready for a proper assault in the championship. But that's been his intention for the last couple of years. But he's picked up knocks at different stages, and he's never had that kind of consistent run in the team where he really gets his mojo back. But like I said, look, from a Kerry perspective, we'd be hoping that when this injury clears up, that he could get a consistent run in the Super 8s, and we could see the James O'Donoghue of old again then.
For sure, and we know that if that forward line is fit and firing, they're as good as anybody else in the country. The question I have, Eamonn, kind of as a final point on Kerry, and it's been thrown about there a good bit with a number of teams, is say if you're putting them toe-to-toe with Dublin, the line is always thrown out about Dublin that they have all the groundwork done of strength and conditioning. They're at their peak when it comes to that sort of conditioning and the gym work, that they can focus on the extra things. How far away are this Kerry team, particularly when it comes to, say, the minor winners from 2014 onwards, in terms of that conditioning? Are they almost close to their peak physical prowess?
I think at this stage they have to be. And to be honest, I think there can't be any more excuses in that regard. The lads in particular that won the minor All-Ireland in 2014, they're now 23 this year, so that's a good age, and oftentimes it can take until that 23 mark, 22, 23 mark to be fully ready to have the experiences under your belt, both physically and just experience-wise. And I think a lot of those lads are in a position where they're ready to drive on now. Some of the younger lads, the likes of Diarmuid O'Connor, who's only just in, he's a big tall, rangy type of player anyway, so he's a bit different. But you would certainly have a bit of patience with them with regard to their physical development. But the lads from the 2014 team at this stage, they're good to go, and they should be good to go. And I can't see physical makeup or physical conditioning being a hindrance to them.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it pans out. And Darragh Moynihan as well obviously gets his opportunity in there, and looks like a huge prospect as well from a leadership point of view and plenty of other points of view as well. We'll come to prediction time, and so, but before we do that, just take a quick listen. The difference for you in this one?
The margin of difference.
Can I word it that way?
Let me see. Kieran went for 4. Was it? Well,
I think the spread is in around 11 points. I think
we'd be happy with 4. And I'm not just saying with my farmer manager's hat on. I think once you win by a point, you're happy and you're on to the next game, and that's it. But let's see. I'll Kerry by 6, hopefully.
Yeah, I always take a Kerry 6 for around sort of 9 or 10 or thereabouts. I was way too cynical with my my take on your prediction. You were bang on.
Yeah, that doesn't happen too often. That was beginner's luck, I'd say.
What do you think?
Prediction this weekend, I expect Kerry to win. I think they've selected a strong team. I think they'll give Cork due respect. There won't be any complacency going up to Páirc Uí Chaoimh in particular. Kerry to win by, let me see, 5.
Right, well, I mean, I'm not going to fall into the trap that I fell into the last time. Well, I do think it'll be more than that. What's the best we can hope out of the Leinster final this weekend? What are you thinking? I mean, again, there's not much case to be made, any case to be made for Meath here. What's the best we can hope for?
Yeah, I think from Meath's perspective, they've progressed, and they'll want to continue that progression. I think a couple of years ago, when Kildare were on that upper curve as well, they were beaten by, was it about 6 points maybe in the Leinster, or was it more in the Leinster final? But they were very competitive for a lot of that game, and I think that's what Meath obviously themselves will be believing they can win the game, but from everyone else's perspective, I think if they can be competitive for as long as possible and stay in the game as long as possible, it'll make it interesting from the neutral perspective. Certainly if they get to half time and it's still a game and they're not, that Dublin aren't out of sight at that stage, it'll be good. But Meath are coming with a good bit of confidence, and again, conditioning wise, they seem to have progressed a good bit this year. So it should be an interesting game. But look, I don't think any of us are expecting Meath to win. It'll be the shock of the century, really, if they did.
Yeah. You seen any surprises elsewhere? Like, we are at that time of the year now where some of the bigger teams are going to go out this weekend. We've Monaghan Armagh, and obviously Monaghan slight favourites for that. You assume no chance of an upset in Longford either on tomorrow night?
No, I wouldn't say so. I think Tyrone, the last day, Donegal played very well, and I think with Tyrone that they had invested a lot in their new kicking style approach, and that Donegal snuffed it out well. Hugh McFadden played that kind of role of dropping back in front of the Tyrone full forward line very well, and Tyrone didn't mix it up surprisingly and go back to their more natural game maybe. So I think they'll have ironed out that kink in the meantime, and they'll use the qualifier route to kind of heal the wounds and get themselves roadworthy for the Super 8. So I wouldn't see a surprise there. I suppose the Monaghan Armagh game is the one that could be interesting, and Derry Leash is another interesting one, and how Mayo play above and down will be interesting as well. So yeah, there's plenty to be watching out for. The Ulster finals obviously going to be an interesting one as well. Donegal seem to be going very well, so to see how they cope with the way Cavan are playing now will be interesting as well this weekend.
Was that Donegal performance in the Ulster semi-final almost a sign of what other teams should be doing, the sort of plan A and a plan B, a very definitive two different plans, especially when Donegal dropped all those men behind the ball?
Yeah, and I think most of the top teams would have that on, and they'd have A, B and C, but sometimes when the game is going ahead, then the opposition, and I think they're the best teams and the best managers, when you go to B, they adjust, and when you go to C, they adjust, and oftentimes it mightn't be picked up in the outside world, but there's a lot of manoeuvring going on, and teams are very tactically aware now, but certainly Donegal were very impressive. I was very impressed with their kick-outs and, you know, the way it got him on the front foot. Sean Patton seems to have been a big addition to them. He looks very accurate, and, you know, they were mixing it up between placing and getting Michael Murphy on kick-outs, and, you know, they got an awful lot right in that game, and they had to beat Tyrone. So it'll be interesting now when they're being talked up a bit, and they're being spoken of contenders, how they'll cope with Cavan on Sunday.
Eamon, thanks a million.
No problem, lads.
Thanks a lot. Eamonn Fitzmaurice on the line there, ahead of all the weekend's football.